we have frequently asked questions at our webpage, and there you can find some answers from us and also some answers from Migrationsverket on questions that we collected in a webinar we had a year ago. You can ask general questions in Q&A section, but we will probably not be able to answer all of them today within the time frame we have, but we will save them and use them to develop our frequently asked questions. The webinar will be recorded, and we will not share the presentation afterwards. So today we will talk about status as long-term resident and focus on the latest development. This was the main reason why we organized this webinar now, because a lot has happened recently. I will also talk about temporary residence permit as an alternative and what you can do while you are waiting for a decision for a new residence permit. And the question, am I allowed to work while you are waiting for a decision, will hopefully also be answered. And then Petter will talk about unemployment benefits and how to get compensation when you are unemployed. And then I will continue and say a few words about our income insurance and the support you can get from Trygghetsstiftelsen when your employment runs out. And then I will inform you about the Migration Agency request for a pause in the processing of delayed cases and how that could affect you, and also what support you can get from your employer. And then finally, what we are doing right now to improve the situation. And there is a lot happening there, as you will see. So, since the changes in the migration legislation summer 2021, there's been a lot of focus on how to get permanent residency when you have been here as a doctoral candidate or researcher. And there are two ways, basically, you can get this, as you know. Either you apply for permanent residency based on the national legislation, or you apply for long-term resident status, which also automatically gives you permanent residency if the application is approved. And today we will talk about the second part here, long-term residency. First, some basic information. Long-term residency status is something based on an EU directive that came in 2003, was implemented in Swedish legislation in 2005. These rules were not changed the summer 2021 when the rules for permanent residency was changed. And that's why we recommended this route as an alternative, as you will see that it might be easier to get this approved based on the income requirement. That is different when you compare long-term residency with permanent residency. In order to qualify for this status, you need 5 years, and it should be 5 years with a consecutive stay in Sweden with a residence permit for either for work, for research, for doctoral studies. Other residence permit that qualifies for permanent residency, that could be as a relative to a Swedish citizen, for example. Also time with right of residence, which is for EU citizens and their relatives, but also for some British citizens that lived here before Brexit. But it's also said that it could be other kind of legal stay, and that is now in focus, has been in focus recently, so I will come back to that. What it could be considered as a legal stay, at which time point you should fulfill the qualification time of 5 years. Also important to remember is that here you can stay abroad for some time, but not more than 6 months at a time and not more than 10 months in total. And these time frames are very strict, as we have seen in some cases that went to court. So this must also be remembered. So 5 years consecutive, certain types of residence permit, not too long stay abroad. An advantage with this route compared to permanent residency only is that here you can apply at any time, also when you have a valid residence permit, and you don't have to wait until it's only like 14 days left on your residence permit. It's also said that a decision should be taken by Migrationsverket within 6 months as a main rule. And as I said before, if you are granted this status, you will also automatically get permanent residency, and there are no other requirements to be met. And with this status, you also have the advantage that you can move to most other EU countries and work there as well. Similar to permanent residency, there is also an economical requirement in this case, but here it's different from permanent residency. What is said here is basically that you should not be depending on certain social benefits that are related to low income. Certain benefits that you can get when you have a very low income cannot be counted to meet this requirement. But what could be counted is, of course, salaries or income from your own company, unemployment benefits, which is different from permanent residency, benefits from social security system that are not related to low income. For example, child allowance that are given to everyone with children, or compensation during parental leave or sickness. Also, stipends could be relevant here, and even income from a relative. So you can see the economical requirement can be met in various ways, which is different from if you apply only for permanent residency. So that's an advantage, and why this has become more popular. The economical requirement, there has been a lot of discussion when, although these rules has been with us for a while, it was kind of a new situation for Migrationsverket, and it was very unclear what kind of requirement they really had. But now it has been said that they want you to show an income for the coming 12 months. And they have said that it's from the day they take the decision, which perhaps is also an issue if it's the day for the decision or the day for the application. But this is at least what they have said. Now 12 months. And as you know, for permanent residency, they require 18 months. So this is shorter. And this is also, there are some guidelines here from the EU court that have been considered. And also unemployment insurance will count. And this is here also, it's important to know that, as you will see later, compensation period in unemployment insurance is at least 300 days if it's approved. And that corresponds to about 14 months, as you only receive benefits 5 days per week. And this has also been an issue that Migrationsverket did not really understand this in some cases, and claimed that 300 days was less than 12 months. And we'll come back to what kind of statement you can get from Akademikernas or a-kassa. So now some news and update. As I said, the income must last for 1 year. That's what they say now. And then from when? Is it from the day you apply or from the day they take the decision? And they claim, Migrationsverket claims that it's the day for the decision, but if you look at EU court rulings, it might be the day of application, actually. So this is still unclear. Unemployment benefits will count, and we have seen examples that they have granted applications while you receive unemployment benefits. But the question is what will happen if you are not yet unemployed, but you might be unemployed, and in that case could get unemployment benefits if you fulfill the requirement. And there, Migrationsverket has claimed that that is something they cannot consider. I would disagree, because there is a court ruling from the highest court in Sweden in a different type of case. But anyway, there is said that if it's likely that you will get unemployment benefit, that should be counted to meet an income requirement. And then at which day you must fulfill the requirement regarding a stay for 5 years. And here, based on the recent development from court rulings, it's most likely that it must be fulfilled at the date of the application. And that's also what you will find in the EU directive. So in that case, it's better to wait until you have 5 years before you send your application. And then also recent development about what could be considered as a legal stay in terms of time between residence permits. And there we have one court ruling that says that that time should count as qualification time as you are allowed to live in Sweden and also work here, at least in that particular case. So that's an opening. As we know that this sometimes happens, especially when you go from one type of permit to another. Another issue is, what about the permit you can get as a job seeker for 1 year after graduation or completed research? Here, Migrationsverket claims that it will not count, but if it would be considered as a legal stay, which is of course, then it could also be included. But that will be up to the court to decide if a case will be appealed. So that's something we are still looking for the answer. And then we have some articles in our membership magazine, Universitetsläraren, where it's discussed, this situation is discussed, and a representative from Migrationsverket also there states that they require now 12 months of income for the future. So that's quite official. Then we know that in reality, their decision makers will not always follow that, which is a problem, and that we have addressed to them. So we hope that they will improve in that respect. And in this one of these articles, there is also one person that is now appealing a decision that is interviewed there. Another thing that we have seen recently is that you might get problems to get benefits from Försäkringskassan if your residence permit runs out while your application for long-term residency is handled. And that's because Försäkringskassan might not see it as a application for residence permit, which is required to receive benefits in that situation. And therefore, we have recommended you to consider to apply for another type of residence permit in a parallel process, which is possible to ensure that you can still receive these benefits. And this, it can also be important to make sure that you are allowed to work here while you are waiting for a decision, because here there are also some unclarities in that part. So please contact Migrationsverket and ask them how to handle this the best possible way. And they are supposed to give you service. That's their obligation. And of course, if there is a risk that your application for permanent residency or long-term resident status will not be approved, it's always important to make sure that you tell Migrationsverket that you want a temporary residence permit in case your application is not granted. And if it's not granted, you can still get some different types of time-limited residence permits. You can get one to finish your studies or research, of course, if you need an extension. You can get a residence permit to seek an employment, and that is for 1 year, no more or no less. And in this case, you also need some financing, but here other incomes will count, like unemployment benefits, and also if you have bank savings. One problem here is that if you get this kind of residence permit to apply to as a job seeker, you cannot from Sweden apply for a residence permit for studies or research. Then you will have to leave Sweden, apply and come back. And that's one thing we hope that the politicians will change, because that's in our opinion, a mistake in the legislation. So what you can do or what you should not do when you are waiting for a decision and your residence permit has run out. Of course, it's a risk to leave Sweden because you might not be able to get back in again. In most cases, you are free to work, to take any type of employment. I will come back to that. And in that case, you can also it's possible for you to get unemployment benefits if you're allowed to work for any employer. And after 6 months waiting time, you can apply for a decision within 4 weeks. And here it's a bit unclear because in the form that Migrationsverket provides, they say that you can apply for that already after 4 months when it comes to long-term residency. But we have also seen cases where they reject such an application as it was handed in too early. So this is also a bit unclear. But at least after 6 months, you can do that. And then one question quite common is when you are allowed to work while you are waiting for a decision. And I would say that if you have had a residence permit for studies, for research, or as a job seeker, and before it runs out, applies for an extension or a new permit that you are allowed to apply for from Sweden, then you are free to take any job. That's basically the rule. And that applies in most situations. There is a service at Migrationsverket's webpage where you can choose what kind of permit you have today and which permit you look for. And then you can get an answer if you can apply from Sweden or not. And this is a rather complicated regulation when you can go from one permit to another. So that's a good help to look at that list. And Migrationsverket is supposed to issue a statement that you're allowed to work, that you are under an exception from the requirement to have a work permit, basically, in the situation when you can work. So that's something you can ask from them. And as I said before, if you're allowed to work for any employer, you may also get unemployment benefits if all other conditions are met, and we'll come back to that. And it's Arbetsförmedlingen that will look at this, if you're allowed to work or not. And what can the employer do to help you? Of course, they can sign contracts earlier so that you get an extension, not the last day, but before. As a doctor candidate, you can be hired up to 2 years at a time after the first year. We know this is not much used. Usually they only hire you for 1 year at a time. But if there is a possibility to give you 2 years, that's something you can ask for, and that will improve your chances to get an application for permanent residency or long-term residency approved. And of course, they can help you with different documents that you need to improve the chances to get an application approved by Migrationsverket, no matter what type of permit you apply for. So that's something you can turn to the employer. I just wanted to say a few words about the request that Migrationsverket has sent to the government regarding delayed cases, and that the request is that you should not be able to apply for a completion of this kind of decisions if you have been waiting for 6 months. But that request only, if you select that, concern residence permit for work and applications for citizenship. So it does not concern residence permits for research, for studies, or long-term residency or permanent residency. So here you will still be able to apply for completion of your case after 6 months. And I also want to remind you that applications for residence permit for studies and research should be handled within 90 days for studies or 60 days for research. And this is regulated in the Swedish ordinance, but also in an EU directive. So now, Petter, I leave the word to you and talk about the unemployment insurance.
Thank you very much, Robert. My name is Petter Broman. I work at Akademikernas a-kassa, which is the largest unemployment fund in Sweden. You can have the next picture.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So what is an a-kassa? Well, we are an organization that are paying out unemployment benefits to our members, and it's an insurance for unemployment. We are closely tied to the trade unions like SULF, but we are separate entities. But to be fully insured on the Swedish labor market, you need to be a member of both organizations at the same time. How do I become a member with us then? Well, it's very easy to join Akademikernas a-kassa. There are two main conditions to be able to join. And first of all, you need to be an academic. And my guess is that that is not a problem for anyone attending this seminar, as you are members of SULF. You also need to have worked some time in Sweden. And so if you have had an employment in Sweden and are an academic, you can join us from the day or from the first of the month that you send in an application. However, to be able to receive compensation or unemployment funds, unemployment benefits from us based on your actual income, you must have been a member for 12 consecutive months or more. So if you only have been a member with us for a shorter period, you can only get a lower amount of benefits based on your working hours and not your monthly salary. Well, if you are a member and become unemployed, you need to meet 3 basic conditions to be able to be eligible for benefits. And the first thing is the membership condition, which is that you need to have been a member for 12 months. The second condition is the work requirement, and that is that you need to have, during the last 12 months, you need to have worked for at least 6 months, at least 60 hours per calendar month. This work requirement also must be met during the membership period. However, we can skip time where you have been fully on parental leave and haven't worked because of parental leave, or if you have been studying without having an employment as a base, but with other funding, then we can actually skip that time as well. So if you, for example, have been on parental leave for the last 12 months, we can skip those 12 months and look for work during the period before that. But the requirement is that you must have at least 6 months of work, and you need to have been a member during these 6 months. Third requirement is that you must be registered at the employment office, Arbetsförmedlingen, and you have to be able to look for and take work in Sweden. And as Robert said, they are the ones deciding if you have, if your situation gives you the right to work in Sweden. So we don't make that decision. That's up to Arbetsförmedlingen. So if I don't have a work permit, what do I do? Well, decisions regarding the work permits are not made by us, the unemployment fund. However, we can help you with information to provide to your application with Migrationsverket. So in the case you need some sort of residential permit to be able to get a work permit, you can contact us and we can give you information that you are a member. We can give you information that you qualify for benefits in case we receive the form arbetsgivarintyg from your employer, and we can not give you a decision beforehand, but we can calculate what level of benefits you would be entitled to if you would become unemployed. What you need to do if you need this help from us is only to contact us and tell us what you need, and we will provide it to you as a membership service. How much do I get if I become unemployed? Well, the unemployment benefits are, first of all, calculated. They are regulated in law. So there are several different unemployment funds, but we all have the same rules to follow. So what we do is we calculate an average working hour and an average monthly salary. And this is always done as a means value over a 12-month period. And the benefits that are paid out are 80% of your average salary, with a maximum of 26,400 crowns a month, which means that if you have an average salary of more than 33,000 crowns a month, you will reach the ceiling of a-kassa, which means that we won't pay out up to 80% of any income above 33,000 crowns. But the good thing is that if you also are a member of SULF, they have an additional income insurance, which means that if you put your unemployment funds together with the extra income insurance from SULF, you can actually get 80% of your salary while unemployed. So, unemployed and registered at Arbetsförmedlingen. Well, you can only get compensation from us when you are registered at Arbetsförmedlingen. And what's important is that you cannot register retroactively, which means that we can only pay out benefits from the first day that you have told them that you are unemployed and want to register as unemployed. To be considered unemployed, you must also meet the following conditions. Besides being registered, you also need to actively look for work, which means that you need to each month send in a certain amount of applications seeking for different types of positions. You also need to be willing to work at least 16 hours a week, and you must be prepared to take all kinds of positions, which means that if you can't find jobs to seek within your expertise, you need to broaden your job searching and search wider and perhaps apply for jobs that you think might not suit you 100%. You can't not apply for work saying, I didn't find any positions in my field. And you also need to live in Sweden. And there are some exceptions to that rule, but the main rule is that you need to be based in Sweden to be able to receive benefits. For all of you that are PhDs, there might be questions when you can receive benefits while you finish your thesis. And the general rule is that if it's not finished, you can't receive benefits at all. It's the same rules as anyone studying in the regular university courses, which means that as soon as you have begun your studies or your PhD, you are considered a student until you either have definitely completed it or definitely withdrawn from the studying situation. When are you considered unemployed then? Well, you are no longer studying or a PhD student when they are completed or withdrawn. And in the case of PhD studies, we consider the studies completed when the thesis is submitted for printing or an equal situation, which means that you have handed over your work, it's finished. And from this date, you can apply for unemployment benefits. What about a study break? Well, I'm sorry to say that that's not possible. You need to withdraw from your research studies, and it must be definite. If only the public defense of the thesis is left, well, that's actually a possible to receive benefits even though the public defense is still to be done. When your thesis is complete, you could be entitled to benefits as long as you either have it submitted for printing or there are only minor editorial changes that remains. And if it's not yet submitted for printing, but there are only minor changes remaining, we need to get a form or any kind of written statement from your handledare. I can't find the word in English right now.
Supervisor.
Your supervisor. And if they tell us that it's only minor editorial changes remaining, then it's okay to receive benefits from that date. And the only thing to think about is that the day onwards, when you actually defend your thesis, then you can't select unemployed and receive benefits for that day. You should actually say that you can't take work that day as you are doing your public defense. Questions, and I think we take those in the Q&A to be answered afterwards.
Yes, exactly. And you will find, of course, a lot of information at the web. And so I just want to say in relation to the long-term resident status that this kind of statement that you can give, Petter, from Akademikernas a-kassa,
yes,
can be then used to try to convince Migrationsverket that you will be able to receive unemployment benefits if you would be unemployed. And as I said before, they argue that they can only consider that compensation if it's paid out when they take the decision and not future possibility. But as I said also that I would argue that that's not really true. But we'll see what happens with the court cases that are in process right now. So thank you, Petter. And yes, here is your...
If you want to contact me and speak about any case, I'm available here. And if I'm not answering or busy doing other stuff, you can always call our regular number or visit our webpage where we have lots of information.
Yes, thank you. And then you provide an excellent service, I must say that, so everyone knows. And so please contact Akademikernas a-kassa for any questions on unemployment insurance. And then I will continue and tell you a little bit about what Petter also mentioned, the income insurance, but also the transition agreement, omställningsavtalet in Swedish, and how you can get up to 80% of the income you have had the last year. And our income insurance in SULF, it's included in the membership fee. But there is a qualification time, and it's the same qualification time as for the unemployment insurance. So you should be a member in SULF, but also in Akademikernas a-kassa for at least 12 months before you get unemployed. So both memberships are needed and required to get this benefit. And the total benefit is then that you can get up to 80% of your previous salary. Up to 80,000 crowns per month, so it's a rather high ceiling there. This income insurance covers 150 working days, so that's about 7 months. If you are full-time unemployed, you can also buy an additional insurance to cover another 150 days, and for that you pay an extra fee that starts from 49 crowns per month, on top of the membership fee to SULF and the membership fee to Akademikernas a-kassa. So 150 days are included, and the other ones, that's 150 days, that's an option, but make sure to also sign this additional insurance at least 1 year before the first day you get unemployed to fulfill the qualification time. So it's just to illustrate the value of the income insurance. If you have had an average salary of 40,000 crowns per month before tax, you will get about 31,000 after tax, depending on what tax level you have. where you live. But then if you get unemployed, the first 100 days, that will cover about 19,000 crowns after tax, and the income insurance will provide almost 4,000 extra. And from day 101, when the ceiling in the unemployment insurance is lowered, then the value of the income insurance will increase, so you will get almost 7,000 from the income insurance. And if you have bought the additional insurance in time, you can also get compensation for another 150 days, according to this illustration. So this is a very good benefit. So then the transition agreement. The transition agreement is a collective agreement that we have signed, and this covers all of you that works within the governmental sector. So that concerns most universities, and there are similar agreements also in the private sector. And connected to this, we have the Job Security Foundation, or Trygghetsstiftelsen, that will help you to find a new job, but they can also, in some cases, provide economical support. And it's if you are made redundant, that's usually when you have a permanent position, but also if you have had a fixed term contract that expires after at least 2 years of employment for the same employer continuously. In that case, you can now get compensation for 44 days with unemployment benefits at the same level, basically, as the income insurance that we provide. This is paid by Trygghetsstiftelsen. And if you are entitled to this benefit, you should first turn to them and get the first 44 days covered by them. And then you can come to us and apply for the income insurance and get another 150 days if you fulfill the requirement. So this way you can get compensation for longer time than the income insurance only. But the Job Security Foundation will also help you to find a new job. They can help you to write CVs, LinkedIn profile, interview training, and a lot of other things. So I would recommend to contact them if you would get unemployed and if you are qualified. So now I will turn to what has happened with the efforts to get the rules changed for permanent residency and other issues that we have encountered. So I start with to cite the Tidöavtalet, which is the agreement between the government and the Sweden Democrats. And in that agreement, you can find this text in Swedish then. And what they say is that in order to improve the competitiveness of Sweden as a research nation, they will look at the possibility to change the laws and other regulations for doctoral candidates and researchers regarding residence permit after some time in Sweden with employment. That's basically what it says. And the problem here is that we have not seen much action from the government in this respect, so it remains to be seen what this really means and if it's about permanent residency or something else. But we have also heard representatives for the government talk about this and that this is important and that they think it's a shame that how the regulation looks like today and so on. So we hope something will happen. But what we are doing now is that, of course, we are having a lot of debate articles and other activities to try to convince the politicians to act. That's something we have done all the way since 2021. And we still have contacts and discussions with politicians. I will come back to that, what will happen actually already today. But we also have a lot of contact with Migrationsverket to sort out practical issues and other things regarding how they handle cases. We cooperate with other unions, student unions and employers, and also the grassroots movement. And in particular, we get a lot of valuable information through the Facebook group there. And as I said before, we have our frequently asked questions and where you can find information about residence permit, but also a lot of other things regarding your employment, salary, and other conditions at the workplace. So this is a list of 10 points that we have asked the government to handle. Of course, one is the maintenance requirement for permanent residency, that you should have an employment for 18 months at the date for the decision. This has, of course, been a large issue and a problem due to the different types of employments we have in universities, but also elsewhere, where it's hard to show that that you fulfill that requirement in some cases. And if you see a red star here, we have actually handed over proposals how to change the legislation. I mean, we have written legislation text actually that they could use or at least look at and see if they want to change something, but at least how it could be introduced into legislation quite easily. We want some improvements regarding the job seeker permit. As I said, you are not able to, if you have that kind of permit, you are not able to apply for permit for research or studies during that time, which is weird. If you have got a PhD, of course, you are looking for jobs within research, and then it's very strange that you cannot apply for a research permit during that time, but you can apply for any other type of job permit. We have something called the researcher's children, which is about that if you have a residence permit for research as researcher or a family member to a researcher, and you get a child in Sweden, you are not allowed to apply for residence permit for your child from Sweden. So you will have to take your child, leave Sweden, and apply and come back again. And this is really stupid, of course, and it also concerns a few other groups than researchers, but in most cases there are exceptions. For example, for students, there is an exception. So you can apply from Sweden, but researchers cannot. We have had some problems when you are posted abroad, when you are sent abroad by the employer, employed in Sweden, but working abroad. They might be solved, but we don't know really. We also think it must be possible to replace a temporary residence permit with a permanent residence permit, so you don't have to wait until the residence permit is about to run out before you can apply for a permanent residency. And this applies when you apply for permanent residency, but you can apply for long-term residency at any time when you fulfill the requirement. We also want it to be possible to leave Sweden while you are waiting for a decision, just the way you now can when you have a work permit and you have applied for an extension. Then you can get certain documentation so you can leave Sweden and come back. But that's not possible if you have had a residence permit for research or studies. We have had some issues for relatives to EU, EA, or Swiss citizens. They might also be solved due to court practice. We want shorter handling times in Migrationsverket. That's a big problem, that the handling times are far too long. And we have also said that the politicians should not implement a waiting time for social benefits for our groups. This is something you can also find in Tidöavtalet, that they want to investigate, that you would have to live in Sweden for some time to qualify for social benefits. But we don't think that should be in the case when you come here to work or for doctoral studies, for that matter. And then there has been some issues regarding passports, that you must go to an embassy and show your passport in order to get residence permit. So that's the list we have. And then we also want to address a few things about long-term residency. That's added also to this list. So what we're now doing, we will now focus on our work to get the rules changed, and on our contacts with Migrationsverket. Your individual cases should be handled by Migrationsverket, and they are obliged to give you relevant service to inform you what kind of permit you can apply for, how to do it, what you're supposed to do while you're waiting, and if you are allowed to work and all that. So we urge you to contact them. We are well aware that you might get strange answers, and that's why it's important for us to follow social media and get other information so we can follow that up with Migrationsverket. And quite often their experts will agree with us, but the cases are handled differently, and this is something. So it's important that we learn more about this so we can contact them and sort this out at a general level. So possible new regulation. I mentioned this Tidöavtalet and the improvements there for doctor candidates and researchers, and still remains to be seen what will happen and if something will happen and when it will happen. The Minister for Education has said that changes will come, but so far nothing has happened really. And there's no time plan as far as we know. But we will already later today meet with the Ministry of Justice to discuss this and ask them what is going on and inform them about the changes that we want to see. And they are also interested to learn from what we have to say. And later this month, we will also discuss the same issues with Centerpartiet. And also there is a proposal for improved directive regarding status as long-term resident under process within the European Union. And we have responded to that and given some suggestions for even further improvements. But the idea with this is that it should be possible to count time in more than one EU country to meet the qualification time. And also that other studies than doctoral studies should also be counted as qualification time in some situations. And the whole idea with this is that EU want to attract skilled workers to the European Union and the member states, and we have to see what happens with this process that is now under negotiations between the Parliament and the member states and the EU Commission. But if something will happen, it will not happen very soon, I'm afraid. So that was everything that we had for today, and
we have quite a few questions, but if you stop sharing, I can ask questions. Okay, so let's start from the top. We won't be able to answer all the questions because there's 71 questions in the Q&A. So that's quite a lot. The first one is that, can this be a job seeker visa? And he refers to if sometime you mentioned in a Facebook group that the limited time, long-term residence status, the application is no longer to be considered as a residence permit application by Migrationsverket, and therefore we may not continue working, living in Sweden while waiting for the decision. But this problem can be resolved by having a separate application or a separate permit on the side while waiting. Can this application permit be a job seeker visa?
Yeah, when it comes to the question if you're allowed to work, an application for a job seeker visa or a residence permit will be fine. And when it comes to social benefits, it's said that it should be a residence permit based on the same ground as the one you had before. But that has been sort of quite, extensive. Försäkringskassan has been quite extensive in what they consider as a same type of residence permit. That's our experience, at least. So that might work or might not work. The issue now is if an application for long-term residency is considered as also an application for a residence permit. And here Migrationsverket has before said, yes, it's considered as an application for residence permit, but now they have started to say maybe or maybe not. So that's why it's unclear, and Försäkringskassan will most likely not see it as a application for residence permits, and that's why we have recommended that you might have to apply also for some other type of residence permit that is as close as you can to the permit you had before.
Okay.
So that's the best advice we can give at this time.
And here's a question for the a-kassa for Petter. How long does it take for a-kassan to issue the letter for Migrationsverket?
It's a good question. Normally, we have very short handling times. I can assure you that we will give it to you much more quickly than you will get a decision by Migrationsverket. But unfortunately, right now we have up to 8 weeks of handling time of new inquiries. But if you need something very soon, I would contact us by telephone, and we probably can solve it faster than that.
Thank you for that. And here's quite a long question. Residence permits for doctoral studies cannot be granted retrospectively, and sometimes PhD students had residence permits based on other grounds, such as hosting agreements and as guest researchers, prior to their PhD. This might result in a gap due to a longer time to decision. How will Migrationsverket handle such gaps for these type of applicants, long-term residents? This is a question for you, Robert, I think.
Yes. Well, first of all, if you apply for an extension for permit for doctoral studies, for example, my experience is that then it can be issued retroactively. But if you change from one permit to another, or if it happens that you apply for an extension and before you get the decision, you finish your doctoral studies, then you might get a gap. And according to now, we only have one, as far as I know, only one court ruling that tells us that such a gap is to be seen as a legal stay if you during that time was allowed to work and live in Sweden, which is normally the situation. So that would say that it's possible to count that as qualification time for long-term residency. But then you should remember that in that court case, Migrationsverket still claimed that that was not to be considered as a legal stay in this respect. They did not appeal to the higher court, but if they will follow it or not, that's an open question. Normally, they say that a court ruling in the lowest court level is not guiding their decisions in the future. So they might still claim that such a time is not a legal stay, and then you will have to appeal that decision and hope that the court will change the decision. And the best would be if the highest court would say that yes, it's a legal stay, because then that would be a guideline for Migrationsverket.
Okay. And the current maintenance requirement, maybe you said this, but I might have missed it. The current maintenance requirement for long-term residents, is there any specific rule, or is it up to the case officers to decide? Or can you use the certificate from Akademikernas a-kassa? Does that suffice?
Yeah, it should not be up to the case officer to decide if it's 12 months or 18 months or something else. That's something that Migrationsverket should have one opinion about, and they have said that it's 12 months, and they have failed perhaps to tell their crew that, or their staff that it's like that. But then of course there might be other things that are from case to case, depending on, how secure an employment is, how long will it last, and so on, how to look at provisional employments like provanställning. That's still open questions. But and again, we think that also a future possibility to get unemployment benefits should also be counted as an income if it's likely that you will get such a benefit, which is if you fulfill the basic requirements. Because then after that it's up to you to register at Arbetsförmedlingen and to actively look for a job and so on. And that's of course usually what you will do. So And as I said, there is a court ruling in the highest court in Sweden, Migrationsöverdomstolen, which concerns different type of permit, but it still concerns the income requirement. And there they say that a future possibility for unemployment benefit should be seen as an income that could fulfill that requirement, as it was nothing that said that such a benefit would not be paid if needed. So, but it maybe Migrationsverket thinks that that's not guiding for them, or they have forgot about that decision. But I know that in the appeals that are now pending, that has been, of course, been one argument used in the court. So we hope that we can get this settled as soon as possible.
Okay. And his question was staying abroad. If you stay abroad and work for more than 6 months at one time, or 10 months in total, if you're conducting field work for research, for example, what will happen then?
Yes, and here also we have seen a recent court case, and that's why I said that these limits are seems to be very strict, because no matter the reason why you stay abroad, it should not be for more than 6 months at a time and not more than 10 months in total. And that's because Sweden did not use the possibility in the EU directive to make exceptions from this, which was possible but not obligatory. So that could still be a problem. So on the other hand, if you compare to permanent residency, there is very unclear how long you can stay abroad. So here at least you know it's 6 months or at a time, 10 months in total. But for permanent residency, it's still an open question how long you can stay abroad, and if it depends on what type of stay abroad there is. But yeah, so that's the difference between those two systems right now. And then also, as I also said, if a new EU directive comes that will open for the chance to work in other EU member states at least, that might improve the situation. But there is still some time to, I mean, that would not be implicated in the short term.
Okay. And what about financial requirements? Can you use savings, sort of accounts, term deposits, if you have them in the applicant's name?
According to Migrationsverket, when it comes to long-term residency, you cannot. You can only count income you have from your savings, like interest and such things. But of course, you can claim that it should be counted, just as an income from a relative can also be counted. But for other types of residence permit, for example, extension of study permit after an employment runs out, or the job seeker permit, then it could be considered.
Okay. And 5 years count, regarding another question. Date of entry to Sweden or date of the permit?
Yeah, that's also a good question. We have seen cases where they only count time from when you came to Sweden, even if your permit started earlier. So to be on the safe side, you should only count from the day you came to Sweden. And especially since we now think that the qualification time must be fulfilled at the time for application. So if you apply before that, your application might be rejected, even if you later have 5 years with residence permit, so and stay in Sweden. So that's a recommendation, but always contact Migrationsverket to find out.
Okay. And concluding kind of long-term residence for non-EU PhDs, is it after 4 months or after 6 months?
When you can ask to conclude a case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say, maybe I misunderstood the question, but long-term residency is only for citizens that are not from EU countries. So that's one thing. This is hard to, I mean, according to the general legislation, you can ask to get the case settled after when you have been waiting 6 months. But since the total handling time for long-term residency should be maximum 6 months, those two timeframes collide, so to say. Therefore, you can see in the form, unless they have changed it, that you can ask for it already after 4 months. But we have also seen where that such a request has been rejected because you asked for it too early. So this is also a bit strange. But if you ask too early and get it rejected, you can of course ask again when you have been waiting for 6 months.
And here's, I think this might be the last question. For Petter, how should we go about asking a-kassa for proof of eligibility for benefits? Is there a way to generate the form from the website?
No, unfortunately, this is it's too few cases to have an automatic handling. The easiest way is to actually give us a call and ask us to give you the form. And you could also, in case you know what Migrationsverket are asking for, you can specify us to sailor suit the form we handle to you. We do this as a service, but we don't really know what is needed by Migrationsverket. But we can make as a decision, or almost as a pre-decision, but it's not a decision saying you have the rights to benefits. But I would say call us and ask for a form, and we will send it to you as soon as we can handle it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for participating. Do you have anything you want to say at the end, Robert?
Yeah, I can say about this statement from a-kassa, and I think it's very valuable because even if we know now that Migrationsverket still claims that you cannot count future possibility for unemployment insurance, it's still valuable to have it, especially if you end up in the court, because then you might be able to convince them at least that a future possibility could be considered. And of course, if the handling time is that long that you later will actually get unemployment benefits at the time of the decision, then they might see it as if you fulfill the requirement. But it's also very strange that if you would be in a better position when you receive unemployment benefits than you are before when you still are employed, I mean, that's a very weird way of argument from their side, that it's better to be unemployed than to be employed. So yeah, and also that you have to tell them that 300 days of compensation from a-kassa is more than 1 year, because they don't realize always that 300 days, that's 300 working days, not 300 calendar.
Exactly. A-kassa is paid out 5 days a week. It's only for working days, which means that it's 60 weeks, and that's in case if you are fully unemployed. If you receive a part-time work or anything like that, it will actually last much longer. Yes. Because then yeah.
And if you have children, or one child at least, under 18, you get 450 days. So that's also something to consider.